Hey everyone. Tonight we're drifting back to the high seas. Go ahead and settle in. Blanket tucked, tea mug placed safely away from your elbow. Dim the lights. Let the phone notifications fade into silence. Because tonight's story is not about sea battles or treasure maps, not really. It's about something stranger, smaller, and in a way, much more human. We're going to talk about babies. Specifically, babies born on pirate ships. Yes, it happened. More often than you'd expect. Because while Hollywood likes to picture pirate crews as floating bachelor pads of violence and rum, the truth, like most truths in history, is messier and softer, and in some cases, slightly more ridiculous. So let's set sail gently into a world where cannon smoke mixes with cradle songs, the odd problem of pirates with families. When you picture pirates, you probably imagine the cliches. Men with eye patches, hooks, and a suspicious lack of dental insurance. And yes, that image isn't entirely wrong. But pirates were also people. They had wives, lovers, and sometimes, children. The ocean didn't exactly come with maternity wards, yet records exist of women traveling with pirate crews. Some were partners, some were stowaways, some were captives who became, well, something else. And occasionally, one of these women went into labor in the middle of the ocean. This presented a unique logistical problem. Where exactly do you put a newborn on a pirate ship? Between the rum barrels? On top of the gunpowder chest? Somewhere vaguely away from the bilge rats? And yet, life at sea adapted. The infamous case of Mary. Read one of the most famous pirate women in history. Mary read, never had children herself while pirating. But her story begins with a strange parental scheme that sets the tone nicely. Mary's mother had already lost one son when her husband died. The boy's grandmother sent money to support the surviving grandson. But unfortunately for the grandmother, that grandson was already dead. So Mary's mother dressed her daughter in boy's clothes and simply pretended. She raised Mary as Mark, tricking the grandmother into sending financial support. So from her very birth, Mary's existence was entangled in deception and disguise. A reminder that children in pirate-related families often arrived under less than normal circumstances. When Mary eventually went to sea and became a pirate herself, she fought disguised as a man. Historians debate whether she may have carried a pregnancy at some point in her short life, but if so, it certainly didn't come with crib mobiles and lullabies. It came with cutlasses and cannon fire. Babies in hammocks. So what about the actual infants? Contemporary sources mention them, usually in offhand ways, which is somehow more chilling. A ship's log might casually note, a woman was brought aboard in labor. And then it moves on. No drama, no fanfare. Just, oh yes, another day at sea. Plus a screaming infant. The hammocks that cradled exhausted sailors were often used for newborns as well. They rocked with the ship's motion, which sounds soothing until you realize it was the same motion that made seasoned sailors vomit into buckets. And diapers? Not really an option. Parents simply managed. Let's just say the ship's deck was not the most sanitary daycare environment. It was already slippery with tar, blood, and seawater. Now add baby accidents to the mix. Truly a nightmare for whoever drew swabbing duty. The sea-brats of the Caribbean maritime folklore contains references to what sailors called sea-brats, children born on ships. Most died very young, disease, malnutrition, accidents. The ocean is not known for childproofing, but the ones who survived grew up in a peculiar halfway world. On one hand, they were raised among grizzled sailors, hearing curses before they could walk. On the other, many sailors, hardened criminals though they were, tended to grow sentimental around babies. A child could soften even the fiercest buccaneer. Some crews treated shipborne babies as mascots. They were fussed over, protected, even spoiled with rations of hardtack that had slightly fewer weevils than usual. Imagine a 1-year-old tottering around in a miniature sailor's cap, clapping at the firing of cannons. It happened. Because why wouldn't it? Humans dragged normality with them, even into chaos. Anne Bonny and the Mystery Baby. We can't talk about pirate children without Anne Bonny. The fiery Irish woman turned Caribbean pirate, who, alongside Mary Red, terrorized the seas with Calico Jack Rackham. Anne was married, then ran off, then allegedly became pregnant while active in piracy. Accounts differ. Some say she had one or more children during her pirating years. If so, the babies were often quietly left with friends in places like Cuba, which is the 18th century version of sending your kid to live with relatives in another town while you take a gap year. Except the gap year involved stabbing merchant sailors and stealing gold. We don't know what became of those children, which is a polite historian's way of saying, probably nothing good. Survival rates were already grim on land. For children associated with pirates, it was even worse. Governments didn't exactly run orphanages for pirate spawn. When the authorities found them, what happened if a pirate ship was captured and children were aboard? Well, awkwardness. Courts had no protocol for sentencing toddlers, so usually the children were turned over to local parishes or workhouses. If they were lucky, someone adopted them. If unlucky, they became another forgotten entry in parish death registers. There's a note from 1720 about a woman captured with a pirate crew, her child taken from her, and then, ominously, the record simply stops. Bureaucracy has a way of erasing people with the efficiency of cannon fire. A pirate ship as a nursery. We should pause here and acknowledge the sheer absurdity. A pirate ship was already one of the least child-friendly environments imaginable. Let's run through the hazards. Cannons, loud, hot, and prone to exploding. Knives, everywhere, scurvy. Enough said. Rats. Sometimes eaten by sailors, sometimes nibbling on anything smaller than them. And of course, the occasional sea battle where the air filled with splinters and iron shot. Yet somehow, in the middle of this chaos, mothers gave birth. And babies learned to crawl. History doesn't record lullabies, but one imagines they were sung over the groaning of the timbers and the slosh of bilge water. The children who grew up to sail. There are hints, just hints, that some children born on pirate ships later grew up to cruise ships themselves. They had few other options. A sea-brat would be an outcast on land, but among sailors, they were one of their own. It makes a certain sense. The ocean was their first cradle, salt air their first breath. And while no famous pirate can be definitively traced as a child born at sea, folklore insisted it happened. In sailors' taverns, men would swear they once sailed with a lad born under the black flag. True? Probably not. But believable enough. Petty realities. Pirate parenting. Let's not romanticize too much. Parenting among pirates was rarely gentle. Food was scarce, punishments brutal. If a child cried too loudly during a tense chase, well, let's hope the crew was merciful. And yet, evidence suggests that women aboard ships were often shielded by pirate codes. Many crews specifically forbade assaulting women. A surprising number of pirates were almost prudishly protective once families were involved. Possibly because they themselves came from fractured, abusive pasts and were, however clumsily, trying not to repeat the cycle. So children aboard pirate ships often received strange, contradictory treatment, both harsh and tender, both neglected and coddled. Let's drift back to Europe. While the Caribbean gave us the most colorful examples, Europe had its own share of seaborne children. Merchant vessels, naval ships, and yes, pirate ships too, all saw occasional births. In England, pamphlets circulated with lurid headlines about infants born on the high seas, always presented as curiosities, like nature's odd mistakes, catalogued for public amusement. The public couldn't quite decide whether such children were cursed or blessed. Some believed they would never drown, being children of the sea. Others thought they were doomed to restless fates. Superstitions clung to them like barnacles. The quiet disappearance. In truth, most of these children disappeared from the record. The ocean doesn't leave many archives. What we have are scattered mentions, strange anecdotes, and a lingering sense of melancholy. A pirate ship was not designed to nurture the next generation. It was a short-lived, violent enterprise. The average pirate career lasted maybe 2 years before death or capture. So children aboard pirate ships were, in a way, born into endings. And yet, they existed. For however long, they were rocked by the same waves that carried empires and navies. Their cries echoed alongside sea shanties. Their tiny lives, barely remembered, remind us that even in the darkest, roughest corners of history, life insists on happening. So, we left off with the image of infants rocking in hammocks between cannon barrels, which is either charming or horrifying, depending on your perspective. Tonight, let's let it be both, quietly, as we continue to wander through this overlooked corner of maritime history. Because yes, the question remains, what really became of these children? Not just in the moment of their improbable shipboard births, but in the slow years afterward. The floating orphanage problem. Pirate crews were not known for their long-term planning. They were enthusiastic about looting, less enthusiastic about childcare. So when a woman gave birth at sea, the entire crew suddenly had a problem. Do we raise this baby? Do we leave it ashore? Do we hope it conveniently disappears? In practice, pirate ships became accidental floating orphanages. Crews pooled resources. They'd pass around the infant, each sailor giving a little attention. Some would donate scraps of fabric for swaddling. Others carved toys from spare wood. A cannonball might be polished into a makeshift rattle. Cute, if you ignore the implications. But always, there was the looming awareness that the ocean was no place for a child. Even the roughest pirate must have known it. Ports as drop-off points. Many babies never spent long at sea. When the ship docked in Cuba, or Nassau, or Port Royal, mothers, or sometimes fathers, made arrangements. Some left the children with relatives if they had any. Others handed them to tavern keepers or midwives. Occasionally, the child was sent to a convent or small parish orphanage. In these cases, the infant sometimes survived, though their chances were still not stellar. A few enterprising women even bartered their children away as part of negotiations for safe passage. "Here's my baby. Please don't hang me." It sounds cold, but in the context of survival, it was a desperate act of hope. Forgotten family trees. One of the stranger legacies of pirate children is how completely they vanish from records. Pirates themselves left few written traces, their children even fewer. And yet logically some must have grown up, married, and had children of their own. Which means, somewhere out there, scattered through the Caribbean and American South, are family lines that quietly descend from sea-born infants. Your neighbor with an odd fondness for parrots? Perhaps their ancestor was a sea-brat. We'll never know. But the genetic legacy of piracy is almost certainly woven into communities today, hiding in plain sight. Women who tried to make it work. We should linger for a moment on the women themselves. Most pirate crews did not allow female sailors, but exceptions existed. Mary Red and Anne Bonny, of course, and others who simply came along because they refused to be left behind. For them, childbirth at sea was not a dramatic Hollywood sequence. It was painful, bloody, and terrifying. No sterile instruments, no doctors, just a few shipmates trying to help. Salt water for washing, sailcloth for bandages, rum if you were lucky, to dull the pain. And after, no maternity leave. The baby became another member of the crew, for better or worse. The problem of noise. It might sound trivial, but one of the greatest risks for pirate infants was simply crying. A baby's cry carries. In the middle of a sea chase, when silence could mean survival, an ill-timed wail might give away the ship's position. There are unconfirmed reports of desperate measures taken in such moments. Crews trying to muffle babies, or even worse. But let's drift gently past that. The truth is murky, and honestly, sometimes silence is kinder. Mascots and morale. On the brighter side, babies sometimes became beloved mascots. Just as ships adopted parrots, monkeys, and even the occasional goat, a child could lighten the crew's mood. Sailors who had lost their own families grew fiercely protective. Imagine a hardened pirate with scars down his face, cooing softly to a baby while sharpening his cutlass. It happened. Life is full of these contradictions. Some crews even believed ship-born children brought luck, like living talismans. Which is ironic, given how unlucky most pirate careers turned out to be. The rare survivors. Did any pirate children actually thrive? A few tantalizing hints suggest yes. There are vague accounts of young boys raised aboard ships who later became cabin boys, then sailors, then captains. None are famous enough to make it into mainstream history, but scattered references describe lads accustomed to the sea since birth. Girls, if they survived, were more likely left ashore. But there are whispers of women in Caribbean port towns who claimed pirate lineage with pride. Whether true or invented, the legends persisted. Governments were not amused. Authorities viewed pirate children with suspicion. After all, what better way for piracy to perpetuate itself than through the next generation? Some colonial governors explicitly ordered that captured pirate children be placed at honest labor to prevent them from inheriting their parents' ways, which often meant indentured servitude, a grim kind of re-education. Ironically, some of these children ended up as sailors in the very navies hunting pirates. Imagine growing up and realizing you're chasing the same kind of ships where you once napped in a hammock as an infant. History has a dark sense of humor, myth, legend, and sentiment. Over time, the idea of children born on pirate ships drifted into legend. Ballads spoke of sea-born babes destined for adventure. Folklore made them almost supernatural. One story insisted such children could always find their way home, no matter where the sea carried them. Another claimed they had webbed toes. People do love to exaggerate, but underneath the myths was a softer truth. People were fascinated by the thought of innocents surviving amid chaos. It gave piracy a strangely domestic edge, as though even the black flag couldn't quite cancel out human tenderness. Let's drift toward the end. So, what happened to the children born on pirate ships? The honest answer is, most did not survive. Those who did were often scattered, forgotten, absorbed into ordinary life with no trace of their origins. They grew up as farmers, tavern workers, sailors, and servants. A few perhaps became pirates themselves. Most probably never spoke of their beginnings, either out of shame or simple lack of memory. But they remind us that piracy, for all its violence, was still part of human life. And where humans go, children sometimes arrive, unexpectedly, inconveniently, and beautifully out of place. A final image: picture this: a ship rocking gently at anchor, the crew asleep in their hammocks snoring, the moonlight soft on the waves. And in the captain's quarters, a baby fusses in a hammock of its own. A woman hums a lullaby, her voice blending with the creak of timbers. Outside, a tattered black flag stirs in the night breeze. It is absurd. It is tender. It is history. And now, as we leave these forgotten children rocking in their hammocks, we can let ourselves drift as well, not into the dangerous waters of the Caribbean, but into sleep. Because whatever became of them, their story has already carried us far enough.